Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the very first episode of Overcoming. My name is Ronja, and I am so excited to welcome you on this ride.
We're on a journey here of overcoming all we fear. We're looking past what others say, no longer standing in our way. Why? Why?
So I have been thinking of starting this podcast for the longest time. And it's interesting that I myself had to do quite a lot of overcoming to get to this point, because there were a lot of thoughts around, but who am I to record a podcast? Who is going to want to listen to it? Like basically all the negative thoughts and all the preempting of negative outcomes and the self-sabotage and the holding myself back. And these are things that I tend to do a lot. And this is exactly the reason why I have been meaning to start this for the longest time, because I feel like a lot of you out there can relate to this. I think I am not alone with sometimes being my own biggest obstacle. And yeah. I'm still feeling anxious now because I'm recording this all by myself. The goal is ultimately to have other people come and join on this podcast and share their own stories of overcoming. But right now, it's just me. It's me talking into a microphone, and it's me, also having all these like judgmental thoughts where I'm like, oh, can I say this? Can I not say this? I just did it. I cannot stumble over my words. Whoa. But I guess what better way? I'll still go for this anyway. So maybe I should start a little bit with my own journey of overcoming. So as already touched on, I have been struggling with anxiety for the longest time, with the preempting of negative outcomes or with holding myself back and self-sabotaging myself due to like crippling self-doubts that would keep me from just doing things and living my life. And there's also been this thing of stagnating and just not living my true potential, because I get stuck in my own mind, and then I overthink, and then I am just not doing, and then next thing I spiral because I feel like I have wasted so much time that I will never get back. But instead of then going out there and just doing these things, I still can't, because all the other things are still there. So yeah, it can be a lot. A lot of this actually stems back to me getting bullied in high school. And the messed up thing is that my biggest bully was actually one of my closest friends at the time. And I just wasn't aware of it, because this is how low my self-esteem was, that I would tell her things that I was struggling with, especially about like body issues at the time. And instead of taking them or keeping them confidential, she would use them against me. And whenever she got the chance to, she would use them to belittle me. But again, because I was feeling so low and so insecure about myself, I didn't even pick up on it as bullying, because I was like, oh, what a good friend, because she's the only one to openly dare to say what clearly everybody else must be thinking. So when I was 16 and still in high school, I went for an exchange year to South Africa, which was incredibly amazing and enriching in so many ways, because I now have a second family. Especially my sister is the biggest blessing, because I never had a sister growing up. But now I have her. I recently was her maid of honor for her wedding. And yeah, I'm just so grateful for our connection. And I can't wait to have her on this podcast, one of these episodes. But anyway, so after I returned to Germany, that's when things started getting really bad for me, because up until that time, it was only the one friend doing like the bullying. But now because I had spent a year abroad, I had to kind of like repeat the year. So everybody else was 1 year ahead, and I was in a new class with new people. And to this day, I do not know what their issue was with me, but there was a lot of bullying going on. I was just not welcome, and that is something that I've just really internalized, that I'm not welcome, or that I don't belong, or whatever. And that has really left a mark on me, because to this day, I get so anxious when it comes to going to places for the first time that I've never been to, or to meetups where there's people that I don't know, because I'm already anticipating that I will be met with hostility and that I won't be welcome, because this is how it was when I returned from South Africa and went back to high school. And it's actually really sad, because there's a lot of amazing events and gatherings or whatever that I've missed out on because of that inner dialogue I had going on within me, or because of that preempting. Because pretty much every single time when I do actually overcome myself and go to these places, I end up having the most amazing time, and I end up making the most beautiful connections, and nobody is like being mean or being hostile, or nobody is bullying me or whatever. But yeah, like actually getting to go to these places is really, really hard. There was also a lot happening at home at the time, and I felt like I just didn't have a safe space where I could just be me and where I could retreat to. So it was a very intense time for me, and it actually caused me to eventually drop out of high school, because I was like, there's no way I'm gonna go on until grade 13, when anyway I don't see myself going to university, but also like I would not have been okay continuing for another year basically. And yeah, so I dropped out. This is a whole other story, but I was actually supposed to start studying at a drama school in Germany. And then I was like, okay, before I'm going to be stuck here for the next 3 years, let me just go back to South Africa and catch up with my second family over there and see all my friends from high school, because I had an amazing year in high school when I was over there with them. And then while I was there, it just so happened that I got to go to an audition at Wits University, where they were auditioning people who wanted to study drama there. And long story short, instead of going to study in Hamburg for 3 years, I ended up going to study at the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa for 4 years instead. And it was the most amazing time. I am so, so grateful that that opportunity presented itself, because it broadened my horizon in the most beautiful ways. It enriched my life in so many ways. I got to have such crazy adventures and meet the coolest people. And yeah, it was just such an amazing time. But then when that time was over, I kind of crashed, because going back to Germany after those amazing 4 years was a lot for me, because I just felt like I didn't belong anymore. I think I already had that feeling before, due to like my high school experience and everything. And then I set out applications and they came back. I was going to say they came back negative. This was not a COVID test. They were rejected. Or there was no response whatsoever. And I kind of took that personal. I internalized this. And to me, it was this whole narrative of like, I'm just not welcome here. Like, I just don't belong in Germany. I just should not be here. And then I ended up doing my master's in London, which was a whole hectic time in itself, but that's also a story for another day. But ever since I finished that, I feel like I've hit like a massive roller coaster yet again. So it's this thing where like, if I'm in university or in school or wherever, like when there's a structure and when there is a routine and whatever, I'm doing good and I get to be productive and I'm feeling like okay and good about myself. But then the moment I do not have that frame, that's when I spiral. Like that's when the overthinking comes back in. That's when all the, like anxieties and the struggles come back in basically. And it got really bad to a point where at the beginning of 2020, I just didn't want to live like this anymore. And I was not at all suicidal, but I was just tired of the life that I was leading because it didn't feel like a life. It didn't feel like living. It felt like merely existing. And every time I would look back or think back of all the amazing experiences that I'd already had in Australia or in South Africa or wherever, it felt like these were the experiences of a different person in a different lifetime, and that I would never get to experience this again. It almost felt like I was at an inner tug of war between two very strong opposing sides. One of the sides being the one that I already mentioned a lot, the one that I guess is very much identified with my inner child and with all that like trauma from like high school and whatever, and that does all the preempting and the holding myself back and so forth. And then there's the other side that is actually aware of what I have going for me, and that I actually do have a lot going for me, that I have a great personality, and then that I am shining a beautiful light, and that I have a lot of things that I am passionate about, and that I have this thirst for adventure. And then these two sides are basically fighting against each other, and usually it's the negative side that wins. And I was basically just tired of this vicious cycle of the negative side always winning, because there was this other side within me that had experienced so many beautiful things in life already, and that wanted to go back to experiencing them and really living and exploring. And it felt like that just wouldn't be the case anymore, like that was a story of the past and I would never get that again. So long story short, I felt that the occasional therapy I went to every other week wasn't enough for me. So then I was playing with the thought of admitting myself to a psychosomatic clinic instead, to spend like 2-3 months there with like lots of different kinds of therapies, group therapies, meeting other people that are also going through their own struggles, and that would hopefully help with me getting out of my own way and sorting my life out, basically. But at the same time, I also had the chance to go back on a boat with a captain that I had been sailing with already 5 years prior to that. So when I did my master's in London, it took me to Australia for an amazing research project where I got to I studied applied theater. I did my master's in applied theater, and I got to be part of this amazing intergenerational arts project that we did with people in an old age care home and with people with differing kinds of disabilities. And it was more of a dance project because not all of them were able to articulate themselves verbally, but they all had bodies that they could use according to their abilities. So there were parts where I was dancing with people, old people in wheelchairs, with people with Down syndrome. I did a contact improvisation dance with a guy that is both deaf and blind, and I learned how to sign into his hands to communicate with him, which was amazing. But I'm losing the plot. So this is why I was in Australia. And when I was there after the project finished, I got to meet this captain through couch surfing, and we ended up sailing together for 11 days. And it was the most amazing, epic 11 days ever, because it was just such an adventure, and like it was just being present all the time and just literally going where the wind took us. And I got to see dolphins swim around the boat. They were like turtles, or like getting to snorkel, getting to like swim and bath in like waterfall pools and whatever. It was just such an amazing time. And at that time, I just felt so alive, and I felt so happy, and I felt so grateful, and I was so much in my happy state, in the state that I actually want to be in. Because I didn't really do any self-sabotaging or holding myself back or anything at that time. I was busy living. I was busy enjoying myself. So it just so happened that while I was thinking of going to the psychosomatic clinic, the opportunity presented itself of going back to the boat, and I decided to go for the boat because in my mind I was like, okay, maybe being away from everything for 2 weeks and getting to live this adventure again is already gonna like put things into perspective and help sort myself out or whatever. And also, even if it doesn't, it's not like the psychosomatic clinic is gonna go anywhere. So I can always go back to that if need be, basically. So I had been sailing with the captain in 2015 in Australia. He had since pretty much sailed a lot. He was now somewhere in Malaysia. So I flew to Malaysia, to Langkawi on the 28th of Feb? 2020. I arrived there on the 29th because it was a leap year. Shout out to my parents, by the way. They had their wedding anniversary on that day, which only comes once every 4 years, which is kind of cool. So fine, I land in Langkawi. I get back onto the boat with the captain. There was another guy at the moment who was crew, Rob, who was also from Germany. And there was the cat. The captain's cat, and this cat is crucial to what is about to transpire next. And the first couple of days were okay. I already noticed that there was a shift in the captain, because when we were sailing before, like those 11 days, we had gotten along so well and everything was just like amazing. Like we had a really, really beautiful friendship basically, but now I kept getting the sense that like he would get triggered super easily about everything, and like I had to tiptoe around him. And sometimes I felt like, okay, if I say something, it's going to be wrong. If I don't say something, it's going to be wrong. So yeah, it wasn't really the best of environments. And then, well, let's just say, because this is a story for like, this can fill an entire episode. But basically, shit hit the fan. On the 4th day of my stay, and the captain ended up kicking me out of the boat. Just that by now we had sailed to Thailand, so this happened on Koh Lipe, a tiny island, super beautiful, in the south of Thailand, and he basically lost it after I touched a dog, because I love dogs more than anything. Okay, maybe to give this a little bit more context, a long story very short, is that in his mind, the dog was sick and only had a few weeks left to live. I touched the dog in order to infect his cat on board. And then first he wanted me to just wash my hands. Then he wanted me to scrub down my arms and my legs. Then he wanted me to take a full-on shower and dispose of the clothes that I had been wearing, because they could be contagious and I should not dare going anywhere near his cat. But also he could have just said all of this in a calm, collected way, like, hey, I'm a bit concerned about that dog because I don't trust that he's healthy. I'm worried about my cat. Could you please? And instead, he changed his mind every 2 minutes. He was shouting at me like crazy, to a point when I was just like crying and standing at the front of the boat. And then there was a point in time when Rob came to comfort me, so he put a hand on my back, and then the captain was screaming at him, don't you fucking touch her. She hasn't taken a shower yet. Go wash your hands before you get anywhere near my cat. Like he had proper lost it. Just to a few minutes later be completely switched out and be completely okay when I was still crying, when I was about to go for my shower. So I was still like sniffing. And then he was like, why are you sniffing? Are you crying? Are you sick? Are you okay? And I was like, how can I be okay after everything that just happened? And I tried to tell him that I wasn't even all over the dog, that I only touched the dog with one hand, that he could have just like told me in a normal way to like do all these things, that he didn't have to shout or erupt like that or whatever. I never got to even finish that sentence, because then he completely lost it. Yeah, so apparently, according to him, because I was crying when I said these things and because my voice was still a bit high pitched. But according to him, I was shouting at him, and according to him, I was a bully, and he would not have a bully on his boat, when he was the one that had been shouting the whole time and was the biggest bully. But again, it's a whole story. Yeah, but the result of that was that he announced that he would leave me on the island the next day, which he did. Things also almost got a little bit violent. There was a point in time when he was like towering over me, and I'm a very short person and he is a very tall, buff guy. And then there was a point where like he placed his hand on my forehead and slapped it with his other hand. So it was kind of like hitting me, but still restraining himself. And at that moment, I was really like, okay, thank God I get to leave this boat tomorrow morning. Yeah. So that's how I ended up getting stranded on Kolipe. And the first few days were a lot for me because I think I still had to digest this whole like traumatic experience that I had just gone through, because there was a lot that happened that night. And then it was the fact that I was in the wrong country, because I was supposed to be flying back from Malaysia, but now I was in Thailand. And then there was this whole thing of how this was not the plan, because again, I had come to the boat to try and sort myself out and not to have way more things to now be dealing with and trying to work my way through. However, after 2 days or something, I sat down on the beach and I was journaling, and I realized how this was the most epic blessing in disguise. Like, this was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because clearly it would not have been a healthy or good time for me on the boat, with all the having to tiptoe around the captain and being scared about his next outburst or whatever. But also because I now found myself on this beautiful island, which was like a little paradise. And it's a really, really small island. I very quickly found my way around. I knew all the shortcuts to get from one place to another. It's so small that you don't even need a motorbike, and there aren't really any cars on that island. And there are a lot of dogs. And as I already said before, I love dogs so much. So I had like my own tribe of dogs, and they would like love me so much. So like the dogs from this one bar would walk with me up to the end of their territory, and then the monks, the dogs at the monastery would take over and walk with me to the edge of their territory, and so on. Like, I had a whole pack of dogs basically. And this was also just before COVID. So me getting kicked off the boat was just before COVID. So when the lockdowns started happening all over the world, I was on Kolipe. And I got stranded all over again. But this actually came just after I had the thought of like, maybe I should not make my way back to Malaysia for my return flight, because by that time, Europe was sort of kind of the epicenter of the virus, while everything was pretty much okay on the island I was at. And the day after I had this thought, the borders closed down and the flights got cancelled. And I was like, booyah, it looks like the universe is agreeing with me. So instead of spending 2.5 weeks on the boat with the captain, sailing between the north of Malaysia and the south of Thailand, I ended up spending 2.5 months on Kolipe, and it was the most amazing, beautiful time. Like, it did a lot for me. And then I went back home to tie up a few loose ends. For example, I finally got rid of this place that I had in Berlin. I had this apartment for like 3 years, but out of the 3 years, I only ever stayed there maybe like 7 or 8 months in total, because I'm just not a big city person, and Berlin was just not for me, and I felt really overwhelmed there, and like it was just not my place. But at the same time, I kept holding on to it because I was like, oh, maybe I'm going to need it one day. And then I was like, no, you don't. So yeah, I let go of that place, which felt really freeing and really good. I got to spend a last summer with my precious baby, my dog of 15 years, Emil, who meant the world to me. And I did have a feeling that this might be his last summer and his last birthday, 24th of July. That's when he turned 15 back in 2020. And yeah, I had the feeling that it might be his last summer, and it ended up being his last summer because he passed away in March of last year. So it's been a little bit over a year without him, which I'm still trying to come to terms with, because he was my everything in so many ways. But I'm just so glad that I got to be there to spend that precious time with him. And I also ended up finding a job in this other cafe, which was kind of crazy because it was at a time where a whole lot of people were losing their jobs left, right, and center because of COVID. And here I was, and I got a job and I got to work a lot. So I managed to save up a lot, which then allowed me to make my way back to Thailand at the end of 2020, which I did. So I flew out on the 30th. I arrived on the 31st. So I spent my New Year's in quarantine. It was my day 0 of being in a quarantine hotel in Bangkok, where I would spend the next 14 days, which was a great time though. Like, it was like a little retreat. And yeah, then I went straight back to Koh Lipe afterwards because I really wanted to reconnect with especially my dogs, all my dogs. But then I did also, after a month, decide that it was time to do some more exploring. So that was actually a lot to make that decision, because again, I was ridiculously anxious because Koh Lipe was like my safe space. Like, it was like my home base. Like, I knew this place and it was comfortable, but I was like, yeah, but you're probably going to be really mad at yourself when you eventually go home. And then it's going to be like, yo, you were in Thailand for so and so long. Where did you go? And then it's like, I just spent all the time in Koh Lipe. Like, I didn't want that for myself. I really wanted to just, again, overcome this thing of like being anxious and not going for things. And I just wanted to travel. And I did do quite some traveling and eventually ended up on Koh Phangan, where I then ended up spending 6 months or so. And it was the most amazing time. And also, and this is just like, it's crazy how I've kind of come full circle, because so much stuff has happened on this island for me. There has been so much growth. There have been so many invaluable lessons. And basically this entire last year and my time on Koh Lipe before that, all of this has been the most amazing, restorative, healing, psychosomatic clinic that I could have ever gotten. So yeah, I'm still a bit baffled by how this all worked out. Like, how I went from being in such a low state and feeling like I am just existing and I just really want to live, to all that drama unfolding and me getting kicked out and then being on Koh Lipe and then things just changing so much in the most beautiful ways. Because if there was a year where I really, really lived, it was 2021. So I was almost going to say that I owe the captain a lot. I don't owe the captain anything. But that dog at the beach, that dog that looked up at me with his like one eye, well, he has two, but the other one was blind, that looked up at me with his like scruffy face. He was a proper underdog, and that started wagging his tail. And then I just like immediately fell in love with him. That dog saved me in more ways than I will probably ever be able to comprehend. So yeah, that is my story of how I got to be in Thailand, and reflecting on all of this and a whole lot of the things that have come up over the past year for me. Like, I kept feeling like, no, man, there are so many beautiful lessons that I have gotten out of this, and I just really would love to share them. And I would love to create a space where we can all just come together and talk about these things that are holding ourselves back, because we are not alone in this. So again, this is the first episode. Who knows where this journey will take us and what shape this podcast is gonna end up taking. Like, it might keep changing and evolving, but that's what we all do as people anyway. So I think that's beautiful. But yeah, I would be more than happy to receive emails about things that you are struggling with and that you want to overcome, or maybe your own stories of what you have already overcome. You can also send voice notes where you share these things, and then I will play them here. Or if you want to share a story on the actual podcast, then we can make a plan for that. Like, that would be amazing. So I just really want to create a space where we can just be our true, authentic selves, and where we can share vulnerably from the heart whatever it is that is going on within us and for us in our lives right now. Because I feel like there's enough spaces out there where we're pretending that we're okay and where we are putting up this front. And I would just love to make this a space where there is no need for this, because you are worthy and welcome just as you are, and with everything that you bring to the table. If you have made it all the way up to this point, I just want to thank you so much for tuning in, for going on this journey with me. I can't wait to hear from some of you. I can't wait to see where this overcoming journey is going to take us. And I just want to close this with a reminder to be kind to yourself and take care of yourself, and know that you are loved and you matter and you are worthy and you are enough, just the way you are and with everything that you bring to the table. I am sending you all so much love, and yeah, until next time, toodles! Can I end a podcast with toodles? I just did. Okay, cool. Toodles!
Why, yeah, hey. Why, yeah, hey. We're leaving fear and doubt behind, no longer blocked by our own mind. We see the power that we hold. We're stepping up, we're living bold. Why, yeah, hey. Why, yeah, hey. Why, yeah, hey. Why,